Second welcome from CT is the day's proverb. And your job here is to listen to the proverb and give us your interpretation of it.
Proverbs for the whole of this week come from the Republic of Zimbabwe.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? This proverb, the one I'm about to read, puzzled even me. And I cannot say that I've actually quite figured it out. But I found it interesting. You should try things. Comma. A grandmother from Chivi cooked stones and got soup.
You should try things. A grandmother from Chivi cooked stones and got soup. What do you think this proverb is telling us, Waziri?
Means there is hunger in Chivi. No food. How would they cook stones?
This is just the journalist.
I mean, what's the backstory?
What's that all about?
It's a story. There's hunger in Chivi, so they had to cook stones. All right, but then what else? So what lesson did this grandmother learn?
I'm floating.
You are, right?
Yeah.
Even City was floating.
I decided to take the last bit. Cook stones and got soup. Meaning, even the most difficult of tasks, if you persisted it, who knows?
You get something.
You might get something positive.
Yep.
That's the best I could do with it.
I think the first line goes with it. You should try things. And then goes to give an example of somebody who tried something completely
Difficult.
Near impossible.
impossible. And they got something out of it.
Very good. That's inspirational.
You should try, for example, Charles, getting more revenue out of Nairobi City County.
We should try auctioning some property.
Why so? Now that we get into that conversation, so many property owners that you listed in a public newspaper and said you owe the county government of Nairobi. What's the backstory here?
So, county governments are run with revenue that's collected from, different areas. You see some counties put roadblocks so that they can collect cess.
Yep.
And sources of revenue are identified and put in a finance bill, meaning every member of the public is informed that this is what is due to be paid, in case you want to get into that business. So if you want to start quarrying, there is a cost to quarrying. Land rates is among the sources of revenue for every county. In fact, for Nairobi, it is the largest source of revenue. And it's not unique to Nairobi. Cities all over the world levy land rates. City of London, for example, collects so much in land rates that by law, they are not allowed to spend all of it. They are supposed to share it with the poorer boroughs in the north. And possibly, if Nairobi was doing that well, not only would we not require to borrow from anybody, we'd probably start lending the GOK. So, over time, management and enforcement has fallen back. So, for instance, for you to put a price on how much you're supposed to pay for that 135 plot that you own, it has to be valued. Now, the last valuation roll in Nairobi was done in 1982. So people have been paying land rates based on a valuation of 1982. In 1982, an acre of land in Karen was going for maybe 800,000.
For an acre.
For an acre. The same acre is now 80 million, possibly. And with time, that had not yet been reviewed. The county now has a new valuation roll. The valuation roll is possibly the only one in all the 47 counties. No other county has a valuation roll. And that valuation roll basically brings as much properties as possible into the roll. We have about 177,000 properties that are now in the roll. But we know that that is nowhere near the actual number of properties that exist. And property means a subdivided piece of land, whether it has anything on it or not, because rates are charged on what is called undeveloped site value, meaning somebody who has half an acre that's fallow or empty pays the same as the person who has half an acre with a 60-story building. So land rates are then charged annually. You pay a small percentage of the value of that land. The new valuation roll comes up with something called a rate struck. So a rate struck tells you this is a percentage. You can calculate for yourself how much to pay. The rate struck is 0.115%. The whole idea was once you've done a valuation roll, you don't then increase the rates significantly, because when the rates go up, compliance comes down.
Yeah.
But in Nairobi, I cannot speak for others. There are people generally who are willing to pay, whether it is parking or land rates or
Market
any
fee.
service. And then there are these ones who are willing to pay. They don't even need to be reminded. There are people who say, Christmas is coming, we need to settle our land rates before we go for holidays. There are those who want to pay, but, get caught up with everyday life. You have needs and shopping and school and so on. And a gentle nudge or reminder, and they settle. And they say, yeah, I actually intended to pay. And you can see they are quite a large number. And then there is a group called won't pay, can't pay. Or I'll pay if you catch me.
Will never be me.
Now, that's why you have people called enforcement who walk around with rungus. Ideally, nobody should be holding a rungu for you to do anything. If it's an obligation, that you have.
Charles, it may sound like a bit of a silly question, but so what is this land rate that you're asking folks to pay? One would assume that if I've bought a piece of land, right, and I mean, we hear it all the time, there are county governments who are asking if there's a waiver, or they'll say pay by a certain date, or we'll say we'll give a waiver of a certain percentage. So what exactly are we asking folks? What are you asking the county county government? What is this rate on land that you're saying pay every year? What is that?
So land is on lease. When you acquire a piece of land in Nairobi, you're given a lease. And most of the city is on a lease. That's why you hear the land is on leasehold. There are a few areas known as freehold. And people used to really run and look for freehold land, because after that, then you don't have a lot of obligations. There are very few pieces of land that are freehold. The area around Dagoretti came to be part of Nairobi in 1974. The area around Ruai came to be in Nairobi at the same time. So you'll still find a few
parcels of land
there that are not leasehold, that are freehold.
Okay.
But everything else that is leasehold, you're supposed to pay a rate, an annual rate for that lease. And it is calculated. And when you buy a piece of land from somebody, they transfer that obligation to you. It's a small percentage to provide the county with revenue, so that they will fix that road that comes to your place and provide water and the sewerage system and all the other services. So because you cannot say that because we are putting water and sewerage, we will only get revenue to do that from water and sewerage. It's an amalgamation of all your revenue, and you put it in a basket, then you prioritize. So the land rates is an obligation that anybody who owns a piece of land has to pay. There is land that belongs to national government, so you will then hear another language of something called stand premium, which the county does not charge. That's for national. But the counties is just a straightforward fixed amount land rate paid annually. And it's a continuing obligation. You will never own land without paying that, unless you're in the village somewhere and they don't charge that.
And is the amount dependent on the size of your land, the amount of that it cost? What is the amount dependent?
It's dependent on the value of the land.
All right.
And that's why I started by telling you about the valuation roll. Meaning, you will know that half an acre of land in Upper Hill will cost 600 million, I don't know. And half an acre of land in Kasarani will there's a generalized acceptance of how much a piece of land in a particular place should cost.
Right.
So that value is then what is appropriated to determine how much you should pay.
Okay.
Remember, the value is on maybe half an acre.
Right.
But you could be having 100 acres.
Sure.
Yeah, so it's extrapolated the same way.
Okay.
And the bigger the land, the more the land rates that,
Okay.
you're required to pay.
So this is an annual rate. You pay every year a certain amount as a land rate. Is it possible that in 2021, CT and his 135,000 acres did not pay his land rate in 2021, and he's been forgiven, it's been looked over by the county, and then 2022 he's still not paid this amount, and 2023 has still not paid? Is it possible that that would happen? Like
It is
that?
absolutely possible.
Okay.
Because like I said, there's this lot of people like CT who say, I will pay only if you catch me.
Right.
And so you then require a lot of manpower and technology to try and follow up. The county was operating database that was inherited from the local government system then. It was called LIFORMS, Local Authority Information Something System. And it was very archaic.
Yeah.
But that's what all the counties were using.
Yeah.
And that's what we are trying to get away from now. Because the LIFORM system is just a database, really. But it's not smart. It doesn't tell you that this month is coming and these are the people whose land rates are due. So that you would be then able to pick a phone call and say, hey, you need to pay. And so we then developed another system that we are now using called Nairobi Pay. And we are in the process of really trying to build the data now that will be used even for future. Because what you have from LifeForms is existent data of just a list of landowners. But it's not smart enough to say so-and-so's rates are due and so on. So it's possible there are people who have gone year on year without paying. Again, automatically it attracts interest and penalties because it's provided for in law. And that is why every year, as you were saying, you will hear some governor saying, we are now giving you a waiver on interest and penalties if you settle the principal. That waiver is always on interest and penalties only. You cannot waive the principal. Yeah, that would never happen because that would be unfair on the other people who have paid. You are supposed to pay the principal.
Okay.
So some people accumulate, and the more you accumulate, the more the interest and penalties, and that is why you can see some astronomical figures that once settled will really assist us in service delivery. But of course, there are people who say, okay, the waiver is on, okay, I've missed it, there'll be another one.
I'll wait for next year.
And so Nairobians then develop this habit of you wait until the last minute, then you say, oh, that last minute I didn't catch it, I will. So we have a waiver going on now for 1 month. And why we've done it again is because, we recently launched our customer care center at City Hall Annex. It's a very nice facility. It doesn't look like City Hall. City Hall had started looking something
else there.
Yeah, and so we redid the whole of the ground floor, first floor, second floor, and it just looks like any modern banking hall and so on. And then we migrated to this Nairobi Pay system that I was telling you about. And it had some teething problems and some hitches. So, for example, somebody would pay through RTGS. It's not connected to the bank, and so it has not updated, and so I come to you and say you have not paid your land rates, and somebody produces their receipt to say I have paid. And then when you realize that actually the mistake is on your end, of course you cannot harass somebody who has already paid. So then we ask the bank what's going on, and you realize, there is an issue of integration and so on. And so that waiver period that ran initially was when we were trying to fix these integration issues, which have now been fixed. And that's why we said, then let's do another one for 1 month. Because once you pay, it's able to automatically update the system. So we have a 1 month waiver going together with the infamous list. I don't know whether it's a list of shame or a list of.
Can we call it a booklet of shame? It's a little bit more than a list.
Yeah.
So in that case, when you said, look, we're going to, essentially what the list has said is that we are going to auction this land if you don't pay.
Is that rates. Yes, we are reminding you that this is yours. You have an obligation. You need to pay. If you are not interested in paying, maybe you're not interested in the land. But some people possibly don't even know. I will give you a very interesting anecdote. Some years ago, before I joined the county, when I was with a newspaper, I got a frantic call from a powerful cabinet secretary. Because at the time, the governor then, Dr. Evans Kidero, had placed such a similar advert in the newspapers.
Yep.
And everybody was combing through
and finding their names.
Finding names, and the minister called, and I need to see you very urgently. And so I said, oh, okay, I will come. And I went and saw him, and he said, what is this? I said, but this is a property under your name. He says, yeah, I can see my name, but what is it? And I said, okay, can I check? So I went, I checked, and I came back to him, and I told him, oh, this is a piece of land you own near Strathmore, in Madaraka. And I was like, oh, thank goodness. Now I remember, I sold this property a long time ago.
Right.
But apparently, the owner had not transferred it to himself. Now, why he was in a panic is because the missus had told him, oh, so you have properties that I am not aware of.
Kumbe, you're playing games, yeah.
No.
So if you have property that I'm not aware of, how do we know that you do not have another family probably staying in that? And that's why I was like, oh, this explains why this powerful man
was in a panic.
Was in a panic because you might be powerful in your office, but at home. So there are many people like that who probably don't know that they have something, or they had and they sold, and they have not
the
transferred.
transfer was not completed.
So the purpose is to inform you and say, this is a list. Please go through it. These are your properties. If you have any dispute, raise it up. There are people that were land buying companies like Embakasi Ranching, where you can see their names, PTO, page after page after page. It's because they have sold the properties to individuals, but they have not yet transferred. So these properties are still in the name of Embakasi Ranching. The same with NSSF in Tasia. Tasia still has a long list, and ideally they should be transferring this land to the buyers so that the buyer takes the responsibility. But now when they don't, then the obligation still lies with them.
Lies on them.
Yeah, so the whole purpose basically was to say, you have been warned. Don't say I didn't know. Here it is. Look, go through it. Find your property. If it's something you had sold, deal with the person you sold it to, and then we can then have a conversation after that, because for sure the enforcement will come. Otherwise, it becomes an endless threat.
Just a circus.
A circus that doesn't elicit anything.
Charles Kerich is the Waziri in charge of finance and economic planning in the Nairobi City County Government. He's here with us talking to us about land and property owners in Nairobi who have hefty arrears on their land rates, and why the county government is asking you to make sure that you talk to them, pay what you owe them. If you don't pay, then some action will be taken, which includes auction. You'll tell us what the law says, the entire procedure of what the law says. By the time you guys are going to auction somebody's land, I'm sure you have to tick several boxes. So, own source revenue in counties is a huge thing. We talk about it all the time. I mean, where is the county not raising enough revenue for itself? The targets for this year in Nairobi City County is own source revenue of what? Was it 20 billion shillings? And this is a very, very high jump from the previous one. The actuals for the previous one, which was what, 11?
Last year we did 10.6.
10.6.
Yeah.
So now you're hoping to raise 20 billion shillings to run affairs in county. And one of the largest tickets for county revenue of Nairobi is land rates. And land rates, you use what you said is the valuation role. Now you have a new valuation role for Nairobi where you've classified various areas and you've said land in Upper Hill, an acre of land in Upper Hill, we value it at this. An acre of land in Huruma, we value it at this. In Kawangware, it's this much. In Kasarani is this amount. And then there is the rate track and say, so if you use this, then there's a percentage of the amount that of the value of the land that then you pay as land rates. And there are many, many property owners in Nairobi. From your lists, by estimation, how many properties are we talking about?
What we have in our valuation roll is 177,000
properties.
The Ministry of Lands has about 285, meaning that there is another 100,000 properties that they have that we do not have.
That you have not captured.
And therefore, we have begun a conversation with the Ministry of Lands for integration. Again, so that if there is any subdivision going on, as soon as it's done at the ministry, we get the information real time.
Right.
The whole idea also would then be to bring this other 100,000 into the roll and start charging them rates so that you meet your target without increasing
the rate,
burdening whoever is already compliant. You know, there's always a tendency to go for the easy money, which is to increase what people have been paying. So instead of doing that, why not widen the base by collecting more? So they say that Nairobi is a rich county that has chosen to remain poor. There was a study that was done by the Commission for Revenue Allocation, which put our revenue potential at 67 billion. We've been studying it, trying to find out exactly where it's coming from. But the highest revenue that was collected was in 2015-2016, which was 12.2 billion. This year, we want to overtake that. Like I told you, last year we did 10.6 billion, which was the highest in 6 years. As of today, we are already at about 11.4, and we have a whole month to go. And it requires a lot of concerted effort because, you know, you might be pushing land rates payments, but then there is something else that, you know, is being neglected. And that's why we are really trying to push our revenue collection to the ward level, not to do it from City Hall.
Right.
Because the ward is where the money is. So you empower the teams at the ward level because they know where every business is. Do you know the ward admin possibly has a small booklet that has listed where all the bars are, all the restaurants, everything.
Yep.
And that data is there, and we are saying, look, you guys, you have the data. You need to help us to collect this. So the land rate is usually the big ticket, but you know, the style of the administration of Governor Sakaja has always been not to harass the mwananchi. And that's why he's really opposed to this thing of rungus chasing hawkers down. We've not had any tear gas with hawkers for the last 1.5 years. Neither with the Matatu people. And we sit at Charter Hall every time and they raise their issues. And then sometimes they realize the issues are amongst themselves because this big circle is fighting with a small circle, and they realize actually it's not even a county problem. So we then even come in to mediate. But that whole philosophy that help people pay as opposed to chasing them down is what we've been trying to pursue. And maybe that's why some people take advantage. But still, that's still how we want to continue. We will get down to serious enforcement. But those things of, you know, people being arrested from their offices, bundled into a truck that was waiting downstairs, and then driven around town for the whole day, those things stopped. They did stop, and they did stop for good.
Right.
And it's genuine stopping. It's not for sure. Nobody can tell you that they saw a county vehicle outside their building picking people. And so the public also then needs to understand and reciprocate that where the obligation is on you, just play
Then
your
do
part.
pay up.
Play
How
your
much
part.
information is with the public? This 177,000 property owners or properties, their owners, are they aware of the rate that they ought to be paying in their area?
That's an interesting question. Everybody who owns a piece of land knows they are supposed to pay. Those guys who don't have land, that's not their interest. They are not the target audience. They wouldn't know. But the moment you've acquired a piece of land, of course you know that this is the value of the land, this is what needs to be paid. And I think before, there was a requirement that for you to transact anything on that land at the Ministry of Lands, the county had to give rates clearance certificate.
Yeah.
Now, that really helped in the past, because it would mean that if you want to subdivide, to transfer, to sell, to take a loan, the county had to give you a rates clearance certificate. And then the conversation arose from the national government about ease of doing business. And they said, look, this is a cumbersome process. Why don't we do away with it? So that disadvantaged the county, because the moment the national government stopped asking for rates clearance certificates from the county, then people stopped coming for those certificates and therefore stopped being compliant. So again, we have raised it with the PS for lands, Korir, and told him, look, we do not want to hamper the ease of doing business, but this is the impact that
this
policy and
having on
directive
us.
is having on us.
Okay.
All you need to do is just tell somebody, we can even make the rates clearance a smooth, even free process. But the fact that you asked for it just ensures that you're compliant. And the conversation on revenue goes also hand in hand with the conversation on debt. As you have heard, counties have about 156 billion in pending bills. And guess who has the lion's share?
Nairobi.
107. And we sat this year and said, look, this thing has to come to an end. You know, people have been kicking the can down the road every year. And a lot of these debts are owed to pension schemes like LAP Trust and LAP Fund. There's some money owed to KRA, to Kenya Power, and so on. And we just say, look, it's not healthy for these things not to be dealt with. Because the moment you're dealing with such huge pending bills, you don't even then sit to forecast and plan.
Yeah.
Because you're busy running away from people who are, trying to also auction you the way you're trying to auction them,
Yeah.
And so there's still a lot of conversation in land that will have to be had once we have managed to start dealing with this issue of land rates. One of them is something called, you've heard they passed the law on sectional properties.
That's where I was going.
So sectional property, or you want to...
I wanted to ask the question because there could be people who are not aware that they owe the county. Like you've said, for example, big land buying and land selling companies that have sold land to individuals, but they still are holding the mother title. So the mother title is in a certain big company, and the individual sectional owners are still not the actual owners of these pieces of property that they are in. Or even in the Sectional Properties Act, you've bought into an apartment, and now you're getting your own sectional titles, and then who knows who's the owner of the piece of land where you own a house on the fourth floor, an apartment on the fourth floor of this particular land. So that's why I asked the question of, is everybody aware that they have an obligation with the county government?
That's interesting, because you will find in every apartment block, there are those three guys who don't pay. People just know house number B2 and A7 are just problematic people, our LIPI, and you'll never miss them in any court. So what happens is, if you are on 1 acre, say on Riara Road, and you have 60 apartments, you see the rates that is charged on that piece of land is what I was telling you, called the undeveloped site value, meaning you're charged as if there is nothing on that property. So assuming you have 60 apartments, you need to pay 60,000. So they apportion and say everybody pay 1,000, so that we put it together and pay the county. You will find many people carry the burden for others, because some people just don't pay. But others want to be in good standing, so they take whatever was supposed to have gone to the garbage company and settle. Now, this Sectional Properties Act is very important, because, first of all, it gives you total ownership of your unit,
your apartment,
of your unit. You see, that land that I'm talking about in Riara Road could have been land owned by Unga Limited, for example, and then Unga sells it to Latif developers. But has not transferred it to Latif developers. Latif developers has developed 60 apartments and sold to 60 individuals. Now, there is something known as reversionary interest, meaning this lease on this land is 60 years. When this 60 years ends, the land will revert to whoever's name is on the title.
Which
so
is
if
Unga.
it is Unga, the land is going to Unga. Now, you guys, you own apartments. You think you own your apartment, but you have actually leased your apartment.
Right.
You have paid for it fully, your 15 million shillings in Kilimani.
Right.
But you don't have the ownership. So normally what should happen is that Unga should transfer it to Latif
Developers.
Limited. Then Latif developers should then own the lease and give the apartment owners sub-leases. But you find again, these Latif developers wants to hold on to the ownership so that
I can take a loan.
I want to take a loan on my unit. They'll tell you, okay, pay 100,000 for my signature. Why am I paying 100,000 for your signature and if the property is mine? Or if you want to do anything with that property, you still have to go back to the
developer.
management company. Now, these sectional properties basically says you have your own title, you pay your rates for it. If your neighbor hasn't paid, shauri yake. If you want to take a loan with your unit, you take it. Once the lease expires, it comes back to you. So first of all, it's a really good thing in terms of ownership because there are very notorious developers in this town who sell the units and then refuse to hand over. And they continue collecting service charge and so on. I know one who was supposed to build a swimming pool as part of the package. He's collected the money, he doesn't want to pay. So, you start fights with somebody, and some people just want peace. So they don't get into those fights. But when that sectional properties is fully rolled out, again, the revenue will significantly go up without burdening anybody. And then you can then have another conversation, Eric, which I have not heard being discussed, known as value capture. Let me just, in one sentence, try and explain what all that is all about. So you have your 1 acre in Upper Hill.
Yes.
On that 1 acre stands UAP Towers with its entire 50 stories,
Yes.
paying the same as this 1 acre next door that has nothing. But every floor of this building has people using the sewage system, the water system, the road network. You are not going to subdivide this 1 acre, but you could then capture the value of each floor so that every owner of every floor then pays rates as well. And that's why I'm telling you, land rates is a big game changer. And that is why London just has too much money.
Sure.
Because you don't just pay on the undeveloped site value the way we've been doing. But these things have to be done progressively. You can't bombard people with land rates together with sectional property together with value capture. It's too much.
For those
So
of you
we have to
say
go.
can't pay, won't pay, the issue here is that whether land is lying fallow or whether land has been developed, that there is the responsibility of paying these rates because then it allows the county to do 1, 2, 3. Is it not? So it doesn't matter whether you've developed your land or whether it's there, you're waiting for whatever happens.
You're supposed to pay.
You're supposed to pay the rates. All right.
There are people who evade even paying for parking,
This is true.
So they will park and then they say, just watch the car. You
Yeah, I'll
see
be
that
back
guy
in a
coming.
flash.
So it's human nature.
Yeah.
For some people, it's just their character.
Okay, let's look at the numbers now, Charles. And are we saying essentially, okay, or rather, what are we saying here? That if this whole list that has been published the other day, if those monies are paid, what are we looking at in terms of shillings and cents that the county would then be able to collect? 50% even.
The number is astronomical.
Tell us.
But I tend to believe, just like I was introducing the issue of life forms, that some of it has interests and penalties that have repeated themselves over time. And if you just scientifically look at the 177,000 and levy, we'll probably be talking about 15 billion.
Okay.
Not the 1 trillion people are talking about. It doesn't exist. But 15 billion would be more of a realistic principal amount, assuming people will take advantage of the waiver for interests and penalties.
And that covers the year 2023, 2024.
Yes.
That comes to an end in about a month or so.
Yes.
Okay. Are you able to make a direct connect between money that has been collected for land rates and services then that are being provided to the county, because what you've said is that the collection of land rates then enables the county to do certain things, right? Infrastructure maintenance, infrastructure development, making sure that water is running. That could be, laughable for some people in certain areas. But are you able to connect between the collection of these rates and the provision of these services in the county, let's say, over the last 1 year? That I collected 1,000 shillings in land rates, and because of this 1,000 shillings that I collected, in the county we have done 1, 2, 3.
There has been a lot of development and progress done. But let me be clear that in government, we do what is called program-based budgeting. Meaning you don't separate the money and say this money from land rates is what will build this road.
Okay.
All the money has to go to what is called the county revenue fund, which is in a bank account in central bank. So you collect money from all over, from quarries and so on, and put it into one basket. Then you do what is known as the program-based budgeting. So the budget then is wholesome. You might find, for example, that land rates is responsible for bringing maybe even 30% of all the revenue to the county, yet the land sector is not getting adequate allocation. And that's always a debate, because people are saying, but we are the goose that lays the golden egg.
Yep.
How comes? And you say, okay, yeah, but we need this because some other essential services like health and education don't generate any revenue, but they consume a lot of money. And you cannot say, therefore, because education doesn't produce any money, therefore we don't spend money on education.
Yeah.
So that program-based budgeting then means that you put everything in a basket, and then you budget for it from there. But now that you mentioned water, that's a very interesting thing that we need to have a conversation about. Number one, the county was very instrumental in setting the water infrastructure system from the 70s and the 80s. And I think the turning point for water service delivery in Nairobi, first of all, came during, there was a period where there was just no infrastructure development for decades.
Yeah.
And, the population grew. There are areas that became settlements. The whole of Ruai, have you heard of a place called Mihango? There is no single water pipe down there. Then, Waziri Charity Ngilu, Minister for Water, brought the Water Act, which went through Parliament. That Water Act transferred all the responsibility from local government to the national government for infrastructure development. So what that meant also is when the county governments were formed, Nairobi County has a water company that's quite efficient, I must say, but cannot do infrastructure projects. Why? Because the Water Act has decided that this project will be done by the national government. National government has formed a body called Earthy Water. So Earthy Water then decides what infrastructure projects to do. When there is no water in the pipe, nobody knows about Earthy Water. They just say the governor has not provided water.
Yeah.
But the infrastructure responsibility had moved to Earthy Water. Earthy Water designs projects, goes and takes a loan from Africa Development Bank or whoever, implements the loan. Part of the loan funding has to do with project vehicles, so they have all these nice brand new Prados. Nairobi Water at the end has to come and pay for that loan. Yet they are in some rickety vehicles. And, it's such an unfair arrangement. So you have this Water Act that has created a myriad of bodies called Water Services Trust Fund. Another one, WASREB, Water Services Regulatory Board. Another one, WSTF, Warma, who all of them are stretching their hand saying you need to pay us a percentage of your money. This one wants money for abstraction. This one wants money for what. Now you have like 6 parastatals that are leaching
from the water company.
So the water company thinks, if I have 1 billion shillings, would I rather lay pipes in Mihango where there are no pipes, or distribute it among these parastatals? And I think we really need to review that Water Act. Now we are beginning to see some loosening where the Nairobi Water is beginning to negotiate to do some projects because they know where the need is. They are the ones that are in every part of the city. So I think we managed to push because you have heard of something called the Northern Collector Tunnel.
Yep.
It's a national government project to provide money, to provide water for Nairobi.
Yep.
But nobody is pushing it. So now the county government, through the governor, has to then go to the president and say, either finish this thing or hand it to us. Because when there is no water, the flack is on us. The public doesn't know that it's not us that doesn't do the infrastructure work. It's by the national government. But I think if that Water Act can be reviewed, let the local authorities have the responsibility of doing their infrastructure. There's really no reason why you have formed something called Earthy Water just to come and do sewerage systems. The same thing that the water company can do. I know that there are counties like Murang'a that have very many water companies. But in Nairobi, you have only one, which is well regulated and so on. That one has 6, 7 different water companies. Therefore, you can then maybe make a case there. But here,
you have one.
It's really
maybe we should
important.
Break it down.
So once we do that Northern Collector, we're now even designing Northern Collector 2 tunnel, which will go with the construction of a new dam called Maragua Dam. All these dams that Nairobi is using now were built by the council then, not by the national government, by the local authority. So it can be done. But if people think that they don't have water because the county is asleep, no, it's the national government that needs to let go of some of these responsibilities. Water is devolved in the constitution. There's no reason why they should be holding on to it. Just to answer your question.
That's a big one. You will come another time. Let's discuss that. And also, before the end of this financial year, we'd like to invite you again to talk about how you've performed budget-wise. I remember having this conversation with you at the beginning of the budget where you talked about, your budget projections, your revenue projections, 20 billion shilling ounces revenue. You've now told us you're likely to close at 12 billion shillings. So what happens to the 8 billion shillings deficit? Have you already allocated it to spending, and is it now creating a new wave of pending bills of money that you budgeted for, you committed to spending, and you didn't have the money? We'll talk about that before the end of this financial year, right?
Great, thank you.
Charles Kerich is the County Executive Committee member for Finance and Economic Planning in the Nairobi City County Government.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.